Howdy, folks. Corky Duke Farminator here. Come with me if you want to farm. This is Farming Simulator 22, Michigan Farms Map, Michigan Pizza and Donut Farm Part 54 Bravo. I'm back. Got myself lunch, took a nap. So I should feel good enough to do a good and nice long live stream and possibly get into June with this. That's my goal here. I want to get into where trees used to stand. This is where this spot is here in this field. Alright. That field's done. That is field 9. Don't have it created yet. Right. Oh, yeah, I do. Yeah, I do. Alright, should be able to get into June, which would be beginning of the summer harvest. Start with the barley and the canola. Sugar's been low all morning. Done a couple of things to try to get it up, and it hasn't stayed low. I don't know what the deal is. And it's not even registering on. It's not even giving me a number. It's so low. It just says low. Yet I feel okay. I mean, I can feel that it's low, but it's not. I'm not feeling like I'm going to pass out low. Just feels low. So it's kind of weird. I say Milky Way candy bars, so this is my dark chocolate, which I love. Earlier I drank some milk because I had just eaten, and I waited a little while because I was waiting for the food to raise the sugar up, and when it didn't, I drank some milk. And I took a nap and woke up. And it was still pretty much the same, so it was very strange. It's already down. I think that's fine. Dang it, come on. Oh. There's more. I missed it the first time, I guess. I'm gonna go get it. I will just use it as grass. As my sheep do use grass, right? Right spot in this there. Yep. Right spot. 3 meters so far. Either I forgot or I just thought I was going to get it in the next cutting. I probably forgot, to tell you the truth. $172 liters. 25, okay, that's not going to need any fertilizer. All right. Done the potato field. On field 12. Got another cut, 2 more cuttings of this field. And in September it goes to wheat. And I'll have to have all the rest of those trees cut down. Yeah, finally got a reading. It's up to 43 and it's leveled off. So 2 more cuttings from those 2 fields. I can plant grass till December, up through November. Oilseed radishes through October.
I've never seen this tractor before.
Stop.
Don't the spot, baby, right here.
Malachi, stop.
How do you know?
That's popping in my ear and it's hurting.
Oh, in my ear. Popping in my ear. Mommy popping. Mommy popping in my ear.
No, don't pop it in your ear. Because you could damage your hearing.
And I damaged yours, yes? I said there is my ear.
Hearing's already good.
There's one in my ear. Ah! Ow! That
Over.
up it in my ear.
Yeah. Hurt.
Okay, this is have I worn that like this before? Have I worn my ear before? Have I worn my ear like this before? Have I worn my ear like this before? Hey, I can barely hold it.
Sam, they
I just thought that it had no hands.
stop.
Can you press the all buttons? Press all that stuff. Hey, good.
Stop. Just stop. Spot it, boys. Miss the spot there. Settle down. Settle down. Malachi, settle down.
I just beat.
Malachi, stop it.
What happened?
What do you when I say settle down, do you understand what that means?
I'm stopping you.
I'm gonna take that out in the living room. Watch TV with it. Take that out there. Field 3 is done. That's another. Oh. Month before that, I got to turn that into oilseed radish. So that will be August. So we only got one more cutting on this field. What are you doing? All right. That field doesn't need to be done. I'd check on that field though. I gotta go do these two fields. I haven't done them yet. little close up of the cakes. be right back. Nothing's coming out. Hello? Hello?
Are you calling your mom?
Yeah.
Call your mom. I got sorry, don't call you haven't called her for a while. Do you miss your mom?
Yep.
Do you want to call her?
Maybe in a little bit.
In a minute. In a minute. Minute. Minute.
Stop.
Your money. For what? Simple John?
Huh?
You want a Papa John? Or you can get a couple of little Caesars.
I'd rather have Papa John.
She told you Papa John.
I mean, you still have your food. Okay.
Let's do it tomorrow.
Alright.
That way it gives us time to finish up your food. I don't want it spoiled. Stop. We're gonna get it tomorrow night. Okay? You can wait a night. Tomorrow night.
Not tomorrow. At the morning. In the morning.
They're not open in the morning. Imagine if they were open in the morning and had like breakfast pizza. I like breakfast pizza. That's good. Oh. Now it's getting too hot.
Like Caesar almost. I was thinking about the mentality that this leaves Trump in, right? Because right now he defeated Thomas Massey. He's spent an enormous amount of money. His advisors are probably all telling him, "You're so great. Look at you, and also you won the Indiana races." But what that also does is that means he just thinks he's a winner. He thinks that he is crushing it, and that he's still as powerful as he was. And this is not the electorate that's voting in November.
No, and it's, he keeps being obsessed with like that one moment where I think CNN showed some poll of like people who consider them, diehard MAGA are 100% behind him.
Right.
That was sort of like tautological. That's who his audience is now, and that's all he cares about. Elections are not, that's not people that matter. So we'll see.
No, it's all right. It's not at all the electorate that's going to be voting in all these states in a couple of months. So may he just stay in his narrow little prism where everybody tells him he's a good boy. We'll see. We'll see if that happens. Anyway, we'll keep covering it. It's great to see you in DC earlier today.
Yeah.
Okay, as you all know, because maybe you were watching, maybe you've been clicking on Blue Sky or wherever you're looking, it is a big election night in 6 states where voters cast their ballots in a bunch of key primary races. We're following all of them. Polls have now closed in most of those states. Results are coming in. They've been coming in. They're going to keep coming in. We're going to keep bringing you updates. And there are a lot of important races that we're following tonight. I'm going to go through a bunch of them here so you know what we're tracking. In Georgia, 3 Republicans have been locked in a bitter primary battle to see who will run against incumbent Senator Jon Ossoff. And remember, Jon Ossoff, he is one of the most, if not the most heavily targeted Democratic incumbents on the ballot this year. And we're going to learn at least more tonight about who he may face in November. We're also following the results from both the Democratic and Republican primaries in Georgia's crucial race for governor. Also in Georgia, we're getting results from the 2 hotly contested races for seats on the state's Supreme Court, after 2 liberal-backed candidates received very big endorsements from former President Barack Obama and former Vice President Kamala Harris. The most closely watched race tonight was probably the Republican primary for Kentucky's 4th congressional district, where Donald Trump and his billionaire allies waged quite a retribution campaign to unseat conservative incumbent Congressman Thomas Massie. And tonight, the Associated Press projects that Trump-backed challenger Ed Gelrain has defeated Thomas Massie in that primary. Nearly $33 million, I should note, was spent in that race, making it the most expensive congressional primary race in history. Donald Trump was so determined to oust Massie.
This money crap needs to be taken out of our politics. Shouldn't be able to just buy an election.
He personally attacked him multiple times on Truth Social just in the last few days at events, and on X, calling him things like the worst congressman and a rhino, and urging voters repeatedly to replace him. He even dispatched his Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, to campaign for Massie's opponent, of course, while the country is in the middle of a war. My point is this, it's clear that Trump really wanted Thomas Massie out of office. And tonight, after his backers spent millions and he had to use his own bully pulpit over and over again to attack Massie, he succeeded. So why did Trump spend so much energy to defeat a conservative congressman in this Republican primary? Well, I think Thomas Massie actually said it best himself.
I vote with Republicans 91% of the time. And the 9% I don't, they're taking up for pedophiles, starting another war, bankrupting our country.
That about says it all. Thomas Massie is one of the most conservative members of Congress, but he has refused to stick by Donald Trump on 2 fundamental issues, 3 very big ones this year, where Trump has betrayed his own MAGA base. I mean, Massie co-sponsored the resolution that forced the release of the Epstein files, and he's been a vocal critic of the administration's efforts to cover them up. You see him there on the screen, a bunch of survivors. And he's also opposed Trump's war with Iran and even co-sponsored the War Powers Resolution to end that war. Tonight in his concession speech, Massie touted his work on exposing Epstein's enablers and co-conspirators and hinted that there may be more to come.
We need basic decency. That's what the Epstein Files Transparency Act was all about. By the way, today is the 6-month anniversary of the Epstein Files Transparency Act. We've taken out 24 CEOs, an ambassador, a prince, a prime minister,
Come on, man.
a minister of culture, and that was just 6 months. I got 7 months left in Congress.
That guy does not seem to be slinking away. He almost seemed gleeful about the 7 months he has left in Congress to do a lot more on that particular issue. So yeah, I mean, the guy's been a very loyal conservative on nearly every issue. I probably disagree with him on a lot of policy issues, a whole host of them, maybe the majority. He's also been a huge thorn in the side of Trump. And that is why Trump wanted Massey out of office. So for Donald Trump, tonight's primary is supposed to be all about loyalty. I mean, he wants to show that Republicans who are not unflinchingly loyal to him and his administration will pay a price. That's what it's about. He's already ousted Republican Senator Bill Cassidy for his heretical vote to convict Trump over January 6th. And he did the same to several Indiana state lawmakers who bucked his agenda on redistricting. The message is supposed to be that the only way to stay in Trump's good graces is by showering him with praise, supporting whatever he does, and telling him he's just amazing all around. But here's the thing. It doesn't actually always work like that with Trump. Now, don't get me wrong, Republicans who oppose Trump will probably wind up facing some mean tweets and a Trump-endorsed primary opponent, and maybe millions spent against them. Just ask Thomas Massey. But Republicans who stay loyal to Trump don't always get rewarded for their so-called good behavior either. I mean, just consider the case of Texas Senator John Cornyn, who has embarrassed himself over and over again trying to stay in Trump's good graces. In the Senate, Cornyn votes with Donald Trump 99% of the time, even more than his fellow Texas Senator Ted Cruz. He posts cringy photos of himself on social media. You see there's the one on your screen. That's him reading Trump's book, just hoping that Trump will notice him and tell him he's a good boy. Now this year, Cornyn even introduced a bill to rename a highway after Donald Trump, but none of that seemed to matter to Donald Trump. Because despite all of that, Trump announced just today that he will endorse John Cornyn's primary opponent, Ken Paxton, in the Texas Republican Senate runoff next week. And Trump made that decision despite all of Cornyn's humiliating attempts to suck up to him. And despite the fact that Ken Paxton is a deeply flawed candidate. I mean, this guy has spent years under a massive cloud of indictments, impeachment, whistleblower allegations, repeated allegations of misconduct and abuse of office. And that doesn't even touch on the allegations of adultery from his former wife who filed for divorce on what she called biblical grounds. So yeah, that guy Trump just endorsed, well, he might have a heart. See? And that's why Senate Republicans spent months trying to convince Trump to back Cornyn, and why they're now reportedly livid about Trump's decision. I mean, after Trump's endorsement, Senator Lindsey Graham told reporters that he thinks the Texas Senate race will cost Republicans 3 times as much money with Ken Paxton as their nominee. And that's money that Republicans won't be able to spend in other races, like, say, defending Ohio Senator and Trump loyalist John Kasich in his race against former Senator Sherrod Brown, or defending Alaska Senator Trump loyalist Dan Sullivan in his race against Mary Popoloff. Trump isn't just betraying John Cornyn. He seems to be betraying all of his loyal, spineless supporters in the Senate. What Trump has demonstrated tonight is that no amount of loyalty can save you from Trump's impetuous decisions. Republicans can choose to stand up to Trump or worship the ground he walks on, but nothing will save them from the chaotic whims of a mad king. All right, let's get straight to MSNBC chief data reporter Ali Velshi, who's at the Big Board. He's been there all night. Okay, Ali, we know Thomas Massey lost, but tell us what happened in Kentucky tonight.
Yeah, lots of stories we're covering very closely in Pennsylvania, Kentucky, Georgia, Alabama, Idaho, and Oregon. But let's go to Kentucky. Very interesting night. This is the first district in Kentucky. That's James Comer. He's an incumbent, as you would expect. He's been called with 81% and 62% of the votes in, but he's got 88% of the vote over there. But that's Kentucky 1. Let's go to Kentucky 4, which is what you've been talking about.
Damn it.
Now 96% of the vote in, and Thomas Massey is losing by about 10% in this district. In fact, if you go down to the county level, you see the 3 most populous counties, which are in the Cincinnati area counties. Boone County, which is where Pete Hegseth went on behalf of Donald Trump. They say that he went on behalf of himself, but Pete Hegseth went to campaign for Ed Galrine, who's the Trump endorsed candidate. 10% gain. with 99% of the vote, and Gallrine's ahead by 10%. In Kenton County, again, 52 to 47. It's a little bit closer there. In Campbell County, the third most populous county, again within 5 points, but Gallrine winning over there. And then one of the other more populous counties on the western side of the state, in Louisville, 89% of the vote in, again 52-47. So it's pretty decisive. That's done. Ed Gallrine is the winner in there. But there are a number of other places that are kind of interesting to watch. If you look at Georgia, there's an interesting vote going on in Georgia. It is a state Supreme Court vote. Take a look at this. There are two of them. In one of them, this is nonpartisan, but the person in blue purple here is the liberal. The person in the orange color is the conservative. The conservative being called Sarah Warren in one of the two seats. But take a look at the other seat, which is much closer. 43% of the vote is in. Miracle Rankin, the more liberal candidate, is behind by 80,000 votes. But take a look at this. Fulton County, which is the most populous county, it splits Atlanta. No votes in Fulton County yet. We've just found out that Fulton will come in probably no earlier than 11%. If you look at all the races in Georgia right now, you'll see that Fulton is not in. So we're going to see how that changes. And what you might see in that state Supreme Court race is the liberal pulling ahead. Again, if I go to the whole state and I look at the GOP primary, Burt Jones, who is the Trump-endorsed candidate, is advancing to the primary against Rick Jackson, none of them getting 50% of the vote. Take a look at Brad Raffensperger. He's way behind, coming in a very, very distant third. On the Democratic side, the Democratic gubernatorial candidate, again, 41% of the vote is in. Not enough to call it. Keisha Lance Bottoms is well ahead of all her competitors. She's just 230,000. She's the former mayor of Atlanta. She's at 60%. Her closest competitors are 14.4%. Again, the Associated Press has made a decision based on information they're getting that it's too early to call that. But take a look at this. Once again, like everywhere else in Georgia, there are 0 votes in for Fulton County. There was a shooting in the county earlier today, so they've delayed voting by 4 hours. As a result, we will not start getting numbers there until 11 p.m. But that'll make a couple of the races pretty decisive. One final thing I wanted to tell you about going out to Pennsylvania, where there was elections as well. Tonight, the gubernatorial race there, the GOP primary, has been won by Stacey Garrity. She was uncontested, but there was this movement to write Doug Mastriano in. You remember Doug Mastriano? Ran for Senate, lost by more than 20 points, but he's as MAGA as they get. Remember, he went to Arizona to try and figure out how those ninjas people were figuring out their election. So, interesting case here. Shapiro obviously is the Democratic candidate, not only very popular, but Josh Shapiro gets a lot of Republican support in that state as well. But there was some little movement on the Republican side to see if Mastriano would run. Republicans in Pennsylvania have decided to run still a MAGA candidate, but a slightly more moderate version of one. I don't think it's going to change the map of Pennsylvania all that much in the end.
So many races we're watching. We're coming back to you, Allie, in a little bit to check in and see where some of these races are developing. The Georgia State Supreme Court races are really interesting. If I'm correct here, I think one of those hasn't flipped in like 100 years, but it would be a very big deal if one did. So we'll keep watching that. But thank you for everything you do. We'll be back checking on some data. We love some data. Okay, joining me now are two of my favorite people to talk to on a big election night about politics and all the things. Tim Miller is, of course, the host of the Vote podcast, and Messina was campaign manager for Barack Obama's 2012 re-election campaign. Okay, so obviously there are a ton of primaries going on. We're going to track them all as we get results. If we get them while we're talking, we'll talk about those too. But let's just start with Kentucky. Jim, let me go to you first. What do you make of Massey's defeat? What should people take away from that? Oh, Jim, you may be unmuted.
Sorry.
Let's see if you can, go ahead. There we go. Technology. Go ahead.
Here's a guy who's a 99% voting record with Donald Trump, and yet they still take him out because of the Epstein stuff and because he fought with him on war powers. The problem is when you own the party then owns you. And in these swing races that Jim and I are looking at so closely, Donald Trump's numbers, Jim, have just fallen through the floor. He carried non-college white voters by 36 points. He's now 8 points underwater. You just don't see movement like that. So coming into November, these candidates are, the Republican candidates are just in a terrible place because they have to continue to show the fealty you talked about so eloquently earlier, and yet try to reach out to these independent voters that are walking away from Donald Trump in almost historic numbers. That is a dance on a knife's edge that they are unlikely to be able to do in November.
Yeah, I mean, the electorate, I was talking to Chris a little bit about this. The electorate is very different from that district from what the electorate will be in November. It still does show Trump has power among his core base. Let me ask you, Tim, just about the money aspect of this, because I mean, this was the most expensive House race in history. $33 million was spent, a lot by outside groups. You mean AIPAC, but there's a lot of different groups that were spending money here, I should say. On one sense, if you're a billionaire, I guess we could tell you, well, we can spend a lot of money and we can buy races on Trump's behalf, but resources aren't unlimited. What do you think kind of this means for the rest of the field, or if we look at the big map leading up to November?
Well, look, I think it's pretty telling. I agree with Jim about his assessment of, what this augurs for the general election, which is not great for the party. I kind of have a slightly different take about what we learned from the Massey results tonight. I mean, at the last I looked, it was 83% of the vote was in. He had about 45%. That's pretty good for somebody that bucks Trump directly and consistently and unapologetically on a couple of core issues, being Epstein and Iran. We don't really have another example of something like this in the last 10 years with Trump. And you have Liz Cheney that votes to impeach Trump and then becomes a major Trump critic. And then she kind of runs a quixotic campaign in Wyoming where she gets absolutely slaughtered. Most of the people that step out from Trump then resign from Congress or the Senate and don't go back in front of the voters. You have people like Cassidy who will buck Trump and then pretend like they loved him all along and go back in front of the voters, like go back in his good graces. Massey was kind of a unique case where he bucked Trump, held the line on his position on him, ran a real race, and he loses by 10%, which is, it's not that close, but it's not nothing, with the most money ever spent in a congressional primary going against him. And you mentioned a lot of that was from AIPAC. There are other groups as well, other MAGA groups. To me, that shows Trump with a little bit of a weakening grasp of the party. Not that it's over, not that the party's no longer a Trump cult, but I think it's a meaningful step in a direction away from Trump's control of the party, and it shows that maybe his grasp is weakening a little bit.
Yeah, that's an interesting, thank you for giving us a little uplift there. But I mean, it's true, that's a huge amount of money in a House district to have spent against him, and we shouldn't minimize that. I've been dying to talk to you both about Texas, because obviously the primary is not coming up in Texas until next week. But today, I mean, this could have been a day where the guy Trump wanted to win, defeated Thomas Massey, and that would have been the political news, I guess. And instead, he endorsed Ken Paxton, and the Senate is basically pissed off at him. Jim, why did he endorse Paxton? What is this all about? What's your take on it?
I think two things. One, he thinks Paxton's going to win the primary. He thinks he's on the right side. And two, he's been long criticizing John Cornyn for being a rhino, for being too close to the Democrats. That would be a very big surprise to any Democrat who's dealt with John Cornyn. John Cornyn's voting percentage with Donald Trump was 99.2, Jen. So, I don't think he's exactly a rhino. But what I think it means, back to your money point, is that this race is going to be another $100 million the Republicans are going to have to put in to try to help Ken Paxton in the general election. And I know they have a lot of money, but when you spend $32 million to beat Massey, and now you're going to have to spend $100 million to protect a state where the Republicans haven't lost a statewide election since 1994, at some point this just becomes math. And it becomes really hard to protect all these incumbents. Some of the races you talked about earlier in Alaska, in Ohio, their seat in Iowa, their seat in North Carolina. There's just not enough money if you're going to spend $100 million in the great state of Texas.
Tim, I mean, we heard from Lindsey Graham and a bunch of people in the Senate who seemed pretty irritated about this endorsement and the money that would be spent and how much money would have to be spent to get Ken Paxton over the finish line, if even they can do it. There's been this theory that it's easier for Tallarico to run against Paxton than to run against Cornyn. Now, Cornyn is also a creature of D.C., which is very unpopular. Paxton is hugely flawed and has many, many ethical problems. Where do you come down on it, and what do you think this all means for, the general election?
Yeah, I think Paxton is a slightly easier opponent than Cornyn, maybe not quite as much as the conventional wisdom is, kind of for the reasons that you lay out there. If you're a Republican in Texas, you go in and turn out the MAGA base. The number of kind of suburban Dallas and Houston, Mitt Romney Republicans is withering. Some of them still exist, but a lot of them have started to vote for Democrats at this point. I think a lot of those will already be Tallarico voters. I think that maybe it lose more with Paxton. This is kind of on the margins, maybe 1% difference, maybe 2% at the most between Paxton and Cornyn. But look, given how unpopular Trump is, I think this number's up to get lower. A lot depends on what the economic situation is, what kind of campaign Tallarico runs. But I think that Texas is potentially in play this year, and the Republicans, as Jim said, are going to have to waste a bunch of money in this race, and not that they already wasted a bunch of money. And that's not the reason they're all mad at Trump. They spent a big $70 million to try to boost Cornyn during this primary. So all of that money, was just flushed down the toilet for no reason. And we should just say, for fun, I want a humiliating end of a career for John Cornyn. Who came into the Senate running an ad campaign where he called himself Big Bad John, and he had a big old cowboy hat on it, and instead he ends like groveling for Trump's endorsement and doesn't get it anymore.
And even after he didn't get the endorsement, his post was like, I still love you. I still love you. It was basically my summary of it. Okay, Tim, stay right where you are. There's more results coming in. We're going to talk about that. A little bit also about what Thomas Massie had to say in his concession speech, which I thought was pretty interesting. We'll be right back.
Nobody really talked about it, but more than half the debate really, and for most of it, the standard meds just don't work because diabetes makes the problem more complex than those treatments are built for. Here's why. High blood sugar damages the nerves and blood vessels over time. It's not just a blood flow issue.
Can Congressman Thomas Massie's concession speech fit the mold of neither a typical Republican or Democratic candidate's concession speech? He talked on the Epstein files and railed against Fox News and Trump's war with Iran and Trump's ballroom, while in the same speech railing against vaccines and making trans jokes and toasting with a glass of raw milk. It was quite a mad lib, this whole speech. Now, Massie's lost tonight in the most expensive primary in American history, in a race where the president himself used everything at his disposal to try to force Massie out of office. Well, I'm sure this race will be picked apart by pundits in a lot of ways for a very long time. But tonight, Massie had a message he wanted to send about all the people who did come out to support him despite Trump and despite all the money spent to oust him.
Listen, if you always vote with the president, if the legislative branch always votes with the president, we do have a king. If the legislative branch always votes whichever way the wind is blowing, then we have mob rule. But if the legislative branch and the representatives and the senators that serve with it always follow the Constitution, we have a republic. There is a yearning in this country for somebody who will vote for principles over party.
We're back with Tim Miller and Jim Messina. I don't know about the chugging raw milk and anti-vaccine, but there were some good moments in that speech. So one of the things that struck me about that, we just played part of it always, and Jim, let me start with you, is I mean, Thomas Massey isn't going away. Bill Cassidy has made clear he isn't going away. I mean, after losing over the weekend, Cassidy came out against ballroom funding and then voted with Democrats on a war powers resolution. I remember, we worked together when you were part of like whipping votes for health care. You're trying to get Republicans on board. You're trying to get coalitions together. That's true when you were Senate Chief of Staff too. How much does that matter that you have a couple of these members, maybe more than just them, who are pretty pissed off and just they're going to do whatever they want to do right now?
Oh, it matters a lot, Jen. There's a saying in D.C., beware of elected officials with political vendettas. And I think Donald Trump is about to find out. That is very true. You have two members who just got defeated for seats they care very deeply about by the President of the United States, and they still have some time to make it very clear what they think. And your Kennedy example of him voting in the War Powers Act is a great example. I think it's very unlikely that we're not going to hear a whole bunch from both of these people, and they're going to spend the rest of their term being very clear their displeasure with the President of the United States. And it's especially a big deal for Massey because Republicans barely have control of the House. They have, they can't even get people together on some of the tightest votes they have. And so if Massey starts to walk away from them, it gets even harder to do anything here. So I think we're going to be in for a whole bunch of theater. Kennedy's the same. He can start voting against all Trump's nominees, object to unanimous consent. For those of us geeks who understand what that is in the United States Senate, it means they can't do anything if Kennedy decides to stop them. So we're about to have a whole bunch of fun with a couple of members who don't have anything to lose and a bunch of free time.
Free Massey, I suppose, is where we're at here. Let me ask you, Tim, I mean, you hear these concession speeches, and it's like there is a future of the Republican Party, or there is a future party, that it just doesn't look like this. I mean, some of the things I think we've learned over the past couple of days is if you go against Trump like Massey did, you'll face his ire. But Trump abandoning Cornyn also goes to show that no amount of loyalty or sucking up to him will actually guarantee your safety in his coalition. So if you're a Republican looking to hold on to power or have power, I mean, what do you do here?
Well, you're in a pickle. I think that if you're a Republican in a red state right now, you continue to stick with Trump because that's where the party members are, even if it's narrowing, as we saw in Kentucky. I think it's a tougher call if you're in a swing state, though. I noticed Trump's going to campaign for Mike Lawler, who's an ultimate swing state, or swing district, rather, candidate in New York, and so I guess he's making the bet to stick with Trump. I think that's pretty telling that he's still doing that. But look, things change in politics, and one other thing that you didn't play that happened in Massey's speech is some of the crowd started chanting at him 2028, President 2028. And I'm not going to be on here right now predicting that Thomas Massey is going to be the Republican nominee in 2028, but depending on how bad things go for Donald Trump the next 2 years, things can change dramatically. And like I mentioned in the first segment, I don't think 45% of the vote is nothing. I think people are very upset with him about the war in the Epstein files, just not enough to get to a majority yet. And Donald Trump ran in 2016, I would know better than anybody, as a direct assault on the Bush legacy in the party. Barack Obama, as Jim Odell, ran in 2008, maybe not as a direct assault, but a critique of the Clinton establishment of the party, and both of them won 2 terms consecutive for Trump. And so I don't know, I think that there are some interesting lessons from Massey's result tonight, even in defeat.
Well, we'll keep talking about it, I'm sure. Tim Miller, Jim Messina, thank you both for being here. Turn on all these both with us. Okay, we've got Ali Velshi. We told you we'd come back to him. He's still standing by at the big board, still vested up. And when we come back, we're going to talk about Georgia, where he kind of talked to us a little bit about earlier, where Democrats are coalescing around their candidates, while Republicans keep duking it out amongst themselves. Some really interesting races to watch there. We'll be right back. Let's run story.
There are chairs on speak.
Let's run story.
Adding just glasses, lights.
Let's run story. Set of lines.
Let's talk about what's
I already wanted it. Yeah. Restaurant store for whatever your restaurant needs.
Here at Elton Game largest election completed without games in 25 years. Fresh big new releases, finally 8 vintage classics, and hard to find imports. You can buy, sell, trade, play with us at our store in Fitchburg, Wisconsin. Or shop online 24/7, anywhere, just like nature. Roll fresh daily, overnight games.
At this point, polls are closed in virtually every state with elections tonight, except for Georgia. Technically, the deadline was 7 p.m. Eastern, but currently one polling location in Fulton County will remain open until just after 11. The polling place, and Allie mentioned this a little bit earlier in the show, but is at an elementary school, and it was locked down earlier today for 4 hours following reports of possible gunshots in the area. Now, as a result, Fulton County election officials are not releasing any vote counts until that polling location closes. So far, Democrats have turned out in higher numbers than Republicans in Georgia's elections, even as Georgia Senator Jon Ossoff runs unopposed in his primary. Meanwhile, as I mentioned earlier, Republicans are battling it out in their Senate primary, which may end up in a runoff, but still interesting to see where that all lands. And now for the race to be Georgia's next governor, former Atlanta Governor Keisha Lance Bottoms holds a wide lead in the Democratic primary as Trump-backed Republican Burt Jones leads the GOP primary with a very narrow margin. And tonight, the AP projects that this race has officially headed to a runoff. So lots of developments. Let's just get right back to Allie Velshi at the Big Board. Allie, you told us a little bit about Georgia earlier.
Yeah.
I just reiterated what you mentioned about the polling place, which is important for people watching to understand. Tell us more about what's happening on the Republican side in these Georgia races and what people should know about those.
So first of all, Fulton County is Atlanta, so
Hello? Hey. All right. I don't think so. What is this again? Because I don't have a life insurance policy. No. No. Yes. Would you have a company? Okay. I did have one for Lippman Brothers when I worked for them. I hope I'm not. It's complicated. Yeah. Okay. No. I don't know, $20 a month. Yeah. Sometimes it feels like 1866. Yes. No, I ended that job. I don't work there anymore. No. No. No thank you. You too, bye.
It's a very, very big deal. This is the race that not everybody's thinking about, but should be thinking about. There are two Supreme Court election races in the state. One of them, they're nonpartisan technically. So the person in the blue collar is the sort of the liberal. The person in the lighter color is the conservative. And they've been able to call one of them. It's a 248,000 vote lead. Sarah Warren will she's the incumbent. She will remain in the state Supreme Court. Take a look at the other one, which is 49% of the vote in. The lead's much narrower. It's 80,000. Miracle Rankin, the liberal, is behind by 80,000 votes. However, the AP is not calling this race yet because of exactly what you just said, because of Fulton County. Fulton County is the most populous county in the state, and it'll be heavily influential. What you'll see is Miracle Rankin's numbers go up dramatically at that point, with most of the state in, except for those yellow areas, many of which are more rural. This looks like this could flip, and this could be a very big deal in that race. Now let's take a look at some of the other races you're talking about. In the race for governor for the Democrats, Keisha Lance Bottoms, former mayor of Atlanta, her lead's weakening a little bit, but she's at 59% to her closest opponent, who's 15%. That's a lead of 255,000 votes with only 47% of the vote in. Why is this interesting? Fulton County. She was the mayor of Atlanta. Atlanta has sort of 8 or 9 counties around it, very heavily populated. Keisha Lance Bottoms is very popular there. So while we are not making a call on this yet, this is leaning toward Keisha Lance Bottoms. Take a look at the governor, the Republican governor race there. This is going to a runoff. Burt Jones, who is the Trump-endorsed candidate, Rick Jackson, who's a billionaire, Brad Raffensperger, the former Secretary of State, again, somebody who stood up to Donald Trump. He called him and asked him for 11,700 votes. He's coming in with 14.4% of the vote. So all across this state, there are just interesting races where interesting things are happening. I want to just point you to Georgia 14. We covered Georgia 14 a lot because this was Marjorie Taylor Greene's election. There was a primary for that. Nobody got 50%, so then there was a special election. Clay Fuller won that. Trump endorsed. He has won again tonight. This is now, so he's already the member of Congress. This is now for the election in November. He will be the Republican candidate there. The Democratic candidate will be Sean Harris, who ran unopposed. Remember, Sean Harris went from getting 37% in the last election to 44% in this election that was just run. So this is an example of Democrats overperforming, winning by more or losing by less. So Georgia is becoming a very, very interesting story tonight.
So interesting. And again, Sean Harris, we've talked to him a couple times.
Yep.
Military veteran, also a farmer. It's the most conservative district in Georgia,
Yep.
but he overperformed. But still, that's all interesting to watch. Ali Velshi, thank you as always. Thanks for doing what you do at that big board.
My pleasure.
Okay, coming up, Senator Chris Van Hollen grilled acting Attorney General Todd Blanche today on Donald Trump's $1.8 billion slush fund. It's just an unbelievable thing that's happening. Let me just show you how that grilling ended.
I have a last question for you. Do you know that it is a criminal offense to lie to Congress?
I am very well aware of that.
Glad to hear that.
We'll
Well,
show
your
you
time
what
in
led up
prison.
to that moment and talk all about it with Senator Van Hollen himself after a very quick
But
break.
it's coming for you in this entire corrupt criminal administration.
General Todd Blanche struggled to defend
What happens
the
when you elect a
administration's
criminal as
unparalleled
president? You get nothing
$1.8
but
billion
crime.
taxpayer-funded apparent payout scheme, slush fund, whatever you want to call it, when he was questioned by senators. Just watch this.
This is an outrageous, unprecedented slush fund that you set up. Simple question. Will individuals who assaulted Capitol Hill police officers be eligible for this fund?
Well, as explained, anybody is
Just let me know if they're eligible for the fund.
as was made plain yesterday, anybody in this country is eligible to apply if they believe they're a victim of possession.
Mr. Attorney, you're not going to submit this proposal to any federal judge or
There is no judge.
any independent authority?
An independent. What does that mean? An independent authority?
It means not somebody who's getting to pick 5 of the members who was the president's former personal attorney. That would be somebody who would be independent.
I'm the acting attorney general. Okay,
And
the fact
also-
that I used to be President Trump's lawyer is just a fact. But I'm the acting attorney general, so don't say the president's former personal lawyer will do something. The acting attorney general will do something.
Mr. Attorney General, you are acting today like the president's personal attorney.
Now, Todd Blanche can scowl and demand and melt down as he just did and tell everybody that they have to call him the acting attorney general. But as Senator Van Hollen pointed out there, his actions certainly appear to be those of a personal attorney. Blanche basically did his best there to defend what amounts to a payout fund for MAGA allies, which Trump himself began to tease as a possibility last year. But I guess there was some good news for Blanche today. His appearance, or shall I say, performance, before a very skeptical Senate subcommittee came hours after and not before the release of his signed one-page addendum, making the whole payout fund thing look even worse. The addendum, of course, broadens the deal between the government and Trump, including forever barring and precluding the IRS from pursuing past tax investigations or audits of Trump, his family, or his businesses.
There's no way that
Joining me
can
now
go
is
through.
Democratic Senator
There's
Chris
no
Van
way.
Hollen of Maryland.
Because
He's
the
a
different
member of the Senate
administration will come in and
Appropriations
say,
Committee. He is one of
doesn't
my
work
favorite
under
people
us.
to watch question people. I almost get nervous
You're
for
going to
them
get
when
your
I'm
taxes
watching.
audited
But you
and
did
you're
a
going to go to
hell of a
prison.
job today questioning him. Let me ask you, I mean, it is quite the timing that this Blanche signed addendum came out hours after he testified before the Senate, and you and others asked him some very good questions. What was your reaction when you found out about that, and what would you have asked Todd Blanche if you had this information before today's hearing?
Well, Jen, he clearly had trouble defending the slush fund that they announced just last night. So they clearly intentionally did not disclose this other part of the deal, which is essentially to give Trump and the Trump organization a get-out-of-free card for any back taxes they may owe because they cheated on their taxes in the past. So clearly I would have drilled in on this piece of it as well. And And what it just exposes is what I said, that everything Todd Blanche is doing as acting attorney general is acting like the president's personal attorney. This is exactly what the president's personal attorney would be pushing for. And that's, of course, the job that Todd Blanche used to have, and he's still essentially doing that job now.
I mean, his personal attorney would also be pushing for him to have a slush fund to pay out to his political allies, which is where we're at. Let me ask you, I mean, going back to this $1.8 billion fund, he seemed to also get quite flustered when you were asking him about who was evaluating who would be getting these payouts. There's so many details here that are so problematic and should be shocking to anyone. There is a panel of 5 people. Trump can fire anyone at any point in time. The other question is there any mechanism, to your understanding, of how we will even know who gets these payouts and how much the payouts are?
So no, we won't know. He gave a lot of sort of gobbledygook answers when he was questioned about whether or not they would make all this transparent. The bottom line was that they are not going to promise that they will do that. And, you know, from their perspective, it makes sense, because part of the purpose of this fund, Jen, is to pay off people who committed crimes. And Donald Trump's urging that were rioters at the Capitol that beat up Capitol Police, those are the people who've been advocating for these payouts. And they want to set up a system where they can make those payouts without the public knowing. And they want a system where it will be a rubber stamp. So 4 of the 5 members will be picked by guess who? Todd Blanche, the president's former personal attorney. And the other one will be picked by the Republican majority in the Congress. And so it's a complete rubber stamp to do what they want to do. And I think the American people are going to see this for the corrupt pay-to-play scheme that it really is.
It's hard to imagine the more people hear about it that they wouldn't see it that way. I mean, we spent the show talking a lot about the elections today. Obviously, there was an endorsement of Ken Paxton in Texas. That seems potentially good for James Talarico's chances. In Georgia, there's a runoff on the Republican side. What is this? The Democrats could very well be in the majority after November's midterm elections. There's a long way to go here. It seems hard to imagine that there would be efforts to claw back this deal. I mean, if Democrats are control the House and Senate, what could they do? And I don't know how much you've been able to think about this, to say, prevent the IRS from saying we'll never audit the Trump family, or allowing this slush fund to have no transparency. What is possible?
So we can claw it back. Obviously, we need the votes to do it. I will be offering in the coming days in the Senate to at least say that people who committed violent crimes, including people who assaulted Capitol Police officers, including the person the president pardoned who went on to be convicted of child molestation, that these people will not be eligible for this fund. And we'll see what Republican senators say about whether they want taxpayer money to be going to people who beat up police officers and molested kids.
That seems like a no-brainer to me, but I'm not surprised anymore by where people vote. Let me ask you one more thing about your questioning today. I mean, before the break, I played that piece of your questioning when you asked Todd Blanche today if he knew it was a criminal offense to lie to Congress. What were you getting at with that question with him?
So, Jen, he had suggested that one of the questions I asked him was based on a lie, untrue information. And it wasn't. And so I wanted him to understand that he was getting very close to crossing the line, because I was asking him about this affidavit that I had from a sheriff's department in Florida, where the person who was ultimately convicted of child molestation was saying to the kids that he abused that he would provide them with some of the payout that he was expecting if they shut up. In other words, hush money. And when I posed that question to Todd Blanche, he said, well, that can't be true. But in the affidavit signed by a sheriff, it's very clear that this person who Trump pardoned was expecting to get this payout and was going to use it for hush money. So I was warning the Attorney General that he was very close to crossing a line and lying to Congress
Can't
when
wait
he
till he goes to
implied
prison.
that
Todd
this
Blanche, Peter
affidavit
Hegseth,
that I ultimately told him about
Pam Bondi, all of them
true
go to prison.
Senator Chris Van Hollen, never a dull moment. Thank you so much for being here.
Trump
with
can
us tonight.
pretend he's president all he wants in prison.
Quick break, Lawrence has Senator
He
Gary.
can build a freaking White House in his cell. That's where he fucking belongs. Sick of this shit. And if you voted for Trump, fuck you. I'll be right back. Right back. Got some over there too, dang.
Asked my husband, when did you get so big? His confidence hits different. It dissolves under his tongue. Works E15.
I'm back in the East, and we are back with Maryland Governor Wes Moore. Governor, thank you for bearing with us while we worked out the technical gremlins. You're familiar with those?
No worries at all. Thank you for having me.
I wanted to ask you about the opportunity before Democrats as people's economic situation, they report, causes them a great deal of anxiety. Less than 30% of Americans approve of the job Donald Trump is doing on the economy. And Donald Trump's corruption and eagerness to take taxpayer money, taxpayer dollars that people feel stretched to begin with, to build ballrooms and arches, now to pay out his political allies. What is the opportunity right now for Democrats?
Well, I think the opportunity is to show that, that we actually care about what's happening in the homes of the people of our jurisdictions. It's like, we have a president who's spending his time focusing on ballrooms and bombs and Bitcoin. Ballrooms that none of us are going to be invited into, bombs to fight wars that none of us asked for us to be fighting, these foreign wars. And Bitcoin, that frankly none of us can even explain what that is. The only thing we know is that the Trump family are sitting on the boards of these companies and are making millions of dollars on it. That the thing that we're focusing on, if you look at what we're doing in the state of Maryland, we've actually now provided $300 million in relief for utility relief for families because we're watching these energy prices rise. That what we've done in our state is we're actually making sure we're streamlining housing so we can bring the prices of housing down. That Maryland became the first state in the country that now bans the usage of supermarkets using your data against you when you go into the supermarket, so you end up paying more than the person who's next to you simply because they're trying to weaponize your data against you. And we became the first state in the country that bans that. That we're trying to focus on making sure that the quality of life goes up and that the cost that the cost of life comes down. But we have a federal administration and a White House that seem to be exclusively focusing on their own returns while hosing out everyone else.
I mean, all the things you talked about are more popular with the voters than anything the Republicans are running on. They seem to be forced to run on Trump's agenda, which is historically unpopular, which a lot of folks think explains Trump's obsession with rigging the midterms. What are you doing in Maryland on the protecting democracy, protecting the right to vote side?
Well, we've really ensured that for elections in our state, that we want to ensure that every eligible voter inside the state of Maryland is going to have the opportunity to make their voice heard. In fact, the day before the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act, which is one of the most consequential pieces of the Civil Rights Act and the civil rights movement as a whole, I very proudly signed legislation, actually, which is the Maryland Voting Rights Act of 2026, ensuring that no matter what the Supreme Court says, that we are going to protect the voting rights of the people of our state. This is about our democracy, and it's about the fact that our democracy should not be determined by Donald Trump. Our democracy will be determined by the people of Maryland. And so we are ensuring that our Board of Elections, which is an independent agency, has what they need to ensure that our elections will be fair and safe and free elections where all eligible voters are not just going to have a voice, but they are going to have a vote.
Governor, my old party likes to turn to its governors, before Trump at least. A lot of people talk about you. A lot of people are enthusiastic for you to run for president. When you throw out barbs like ballrooms, bombs, and bitcoins, it's part of what they love about your leadership. Just tell me where your head is on throwing your hat in the ring and what concerns you have. Donald Trump seems to get thin-skinned and threatened quickly and easily by people who he thinks represent a political threat.
Well, listen, I'm very clear that the president spends a lot of his time tweeting about me and attacking me. He just did it again yesterday. But the thing that's most disturbing is how much time he's attacking my people. There is no state in the country that's been under a greater measurement of attack than the state of Maryland. Donald Trump and J.D. Vance have now fired over 31,000 Marylanders in the past year alone. Federal workers, people who are doing things like making sure that our food is safe and making sure that planes are not colliding. And these are the people he went after first. He's gone after our health care. He's gone after food assistance for our children. And I think the people of our state know two things. One, they know I am focused on November, and I'm focused on making sure that we can win re-election. And we're focused on making sure we're protecting our people because the president has learned, I will work with anyone, but I will bow to no one. And here in Maryland, we're just no different.
A lot of people in Maryland work in the area of public health. I remember that from my time in government. There's an Ebola outbreak. It's been declared a world health emergency. Do you have any wisdom or thoughts from people who used to be on the front lines protecting not just people in your state, but everyone in the country and around the world from diseases?
Come on.
Ebola?
Come on.
Dire are
Bullshit. I wasn't going that fast. Damn it.
Yeah, well, first, I want to give thanks to all these frontline healthcare workers, because at times, whether you're talking about Ebola, the Hunter virus, etc., when we're all being told to be cautious, they are the ones who are leading in and making sure that they're providing the support to people. So first, I just want to say thank you to all of them. The second is I want people to know that on the state levels, this is something that we are taking seriously. That we know that any time you see these type of movements, anytime you see this type of data, that we have to be able to and be ready to move aggressively to be able to address it. And that's exactly what we're doing in Maryland. That's exactly what we're doing on the state level.
Supplies are low, deliveries are late. You can scream all day, or you can try the Webster own way.
Hey, I need more cups.
Order.
Oh, I get it this week. So what we're doing is stay on the same level.
Governor Westmore of Maryland, you've been very generous with your time and endured some of our technical glitches. We're grateful to you. Thank you.
I'm grateful for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. Today, as voters head to the polls in 6 states, there are, as we've been discussing with the governor, flashing bright red warning signs for Republicans and for Donald Trump. Just 37% of Americans approve of the job Donald Trump is doing. In a highly respected new poll, the New York Times Siena poll, it's a 4-point drop since January. Another poll, CBS and YouGov, also has Donald Trump at 37%. A whopping 63% of Americans disapprove of the job Donald Trump is doing. And it's not just a low for Donald Trump, right? That would seem obvious. It's a historic low for any president, at least compared to the last two. Nate Cohn from the New York Times puts these awful numbers for Trump in this perspective, writing, quote, "While recent presidencies have often been unpopular and polarizing, no president's approval rating has been under 38% for more than a few days in the last 17 years. That's according to our average. If there has been a floor during this partisan era of politics, Trump's ratings today have fallen to it. There's nothing here to suggest that Trump has hit the floor. Just 28% of Americans approve of his handling of the cost of living in that new New York Times poll. His handling of inflation is down at 27% in the CBS YouGov poll. 65% of Americans in that poll say Trump's policies are making the economy worse in the short term. 77%, almost 80% of Americans say their incomes are not keeping up with inflation. As Americans are feeling the pain of Donald Trump's failures on the economy, something he ran on, they also see clearly and believe that he's using the presidency to benefit himself personally. A YouGov poll finds that almost 60% of Americans believe Trump is using his office for personal gain. It's not just bad political news, devastating political news for someone as vain as Donald Trump. It also looks bleak politically for his Republican enablers. The New York Times Siena poll shows that Democrats
Vote every single Republican out.
39%. Voters are asked which
And the
party
married
they will
ones,
support
too.
in congressional races. The signs that even his base has had enough of him. 37% of Republicans tell the New York Times that they want their party to go in a different direction than Trump. So just how frustrated Trump's base is remains to be seen. He's had some political wins in Indiana. We'll be focused in on that question tonight as Trump turns into a referendum issue. His brand of MAGA Republicanism. He's seeking to oust two Republican incumbents, Kentucky Congressman Thomas Massie and Texas Senator John Cornyn, in favor of die-hard loyalists, Ed Gallrein in Kentucky and scandal-ridden Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. Joining our coverage, Democratic pollster and political analyst Cornell Belcher. Back with us, political analyst, former Senator Claire McCaskill, former San Antonio mayor and housing secretary under President Obama. Political analyst Julian Castro is here. Let me ask you, William, first, what's happening in Texas?
Well, today's announcement by Donald Trump that he's endorsing the Attorney General Ken Paxton in a runoff that'll happen a week from today against Senator John Cornyn. I mean, that really gives a leg up to Ken Paxton and has to be welcome news by James Tallarico. Polling has shown that Tallarico is very competitive, the Democrat, very competitive against both of them, but a couple of points better against Ken Paxton. And you can understand why. This was a guy that a federal indictment hung over his head for years, got impeached, a whole bunch of baggage that makes him weak, especially in this cycle. And so the latest polling has Tallarico either tied or just ahead of Ken Paxton. And it has been that way ever since Tallarico won the primary in March. So this is big news, and it means that it's going to be a very competitive election in November here in Texas, the first time in a very long time.
And you hear that privately and publicly. I want to show all of you what the thing about Trump 2.0 is. It's all out loud. It's all on camera. Here he is talking about what his priorities are as president. read this to you, Cornell. Trump says, quote, I'm doing a job on the reflecting lake. It's renamed a lake. I'm not sure if that's like Gulf of America renaming or just a misstatement. I'm doing a job on the reflecting lake for a fraction of what they paid. Now I've upgraded it I got so into it, I've upgraded it like you wouldn't believe. I'm doing all the walkways outside. You know, I'm doing it. I'm doing it properly, but it is a much bigger job. But you see, it's happening now. It's going to be beautiful. It's going to be waterproof.
11 Army, 11 Nation. At George Washington's Mount Vernon, his story remains. Preserved in a place where history unfolded.
All right now.
Reflecting cooling. I hope so. It's going to
Stop. Stop it right now.
Again. I took over a dirty, filthy thing that wasn't open, and it was disgusting.
Stop playing with my blanket. Leave it there.
The Lincoln or the Washington.
Lay down and take a
They
nap.
would say, quote, sir, it's disgusting. I said, what's disgusting? The reflecting lake.
Don't move the blanket.
It's
I don't
very
want the
reflective.
blanket moved.
I put a thing out yesterday showing the reflection. We did a little test. We wanted to see. It's like a mirror. It's beautiful. That's a quote. I can't believe that he actually said that. That is the man with his hands on the nuclear code. That is also the man that 70% of Americans describe themselves as feeling either, quote, frustrated or angry about when it comes to his approach to the economy. This is the diligence that he never showed around COVID, that he hasn't communicated publicly when it comes to the war in Iran. But on the reflecting pool, it is a near obsession.
Well, you know, he may very well be doing a great job on the reflecting pool. So the problem is they're hiring this commander with the reflecting pool, which is why his poll numbers are so poorly. And let's dig into that a little bit more, Nicole, and why his approval numbers are important, or for any president that's important. If you go to the New York Times poll and you look at the approval, disapproval of the president, they're looking how the voters are breaking that 11-point gap, that 11-point margin by Democrats. It's really important. I want to say something about that first.
Get away from there.
So if you look at what's happening underneath there, Nicole, you have 70+% of voters who disapprove of Donald Trump supporting the Democrat candidate and the generic Democrat candidate. That's why the approval is important. Approval, disapproval is important. That's why you don't want your president or the leader of your party to have his or her
Get down and get away from there.
his approval ratings that low, because you're getting 70% of those who disapprove are breaking from the opposition party, which puts them in a particularly problematic place. The 11-point gap, Nicole, is really important at polling because, look, back in 2005, 2006, when I was TNC's pollster for Chairman Dean, we gradually began to see 5-point, 4-point, 6-point, 8-point, about 10-point gap. And we sort of saw this wave election coming. And to get a double-digit support for Democrats, but historically structurally, you needed at least a 10 or 11-point generic to see a wave election for Democrats. Structurally. I don't know if that's true anymore.
Go watch TV.
Through their
Go watch TV.
their hubris,
Malachi, go watch TV.
African-American.
You're not bouncing all around my room.
They have broken down their wall, their barrier for breaking up a wave election by making strong Republican districts less strongly Republican. So with a 11-point gap now, I actually don't know what's possibly going to happen. I think Democrats could very well pick up more seats than they have historically with a 10 or 11-point gap, because they've eroded away their breakwater strong Republican districts.
Will you explain that, Cornell? I've done this a billion times, but just explain how their gerrymander actually makes all the seats more competitive, because it spread out a lot of people who might have voted for Democrats who were maybe in one district across districts.
Yeah. So typically, look, one of the hardest things to do is take out an incumbent. And we've got incumbents that have, and we talked about before, right? Typically the House is the House of Representatives is fought out between maybe 25, maybe 30 seats at most. Most of them are safe, and then there's the seats that are super safe. So you take a plus 15 Republican district, and you make that district by diluting it and moving in more Democrats and more minority voters. You take that plus 15 district, which has been wave proof, right? It's hard to get away more than plus 15. You take that plus 15 seat, you make that plus 8, or you make that plus 7, and then you have a wave election, which we've seen from the off-year elections and the special elections, where Democrats have outperformed sometimes 19, 20 points what they've historically been doing. And so that all of a sudden, you've got a whole lot of Republican seats that are now plus 5 or plus 6 that are reachable by a wave election, which they would not have been reachable by a wave election if they had circumstances.
Right. It can be a smaller wave, as was someone said to me, because you've now got smaller margins for error. There's so much more in the polls. I want to keep digging through them with all of you. I have to sneak in a break. No one's going anywhere. Also ahead, Donald Trump's retribution tour heads to Kentucky, as we said, where Trump is going. He's obsessed with trying to defeat the Republican congressman who led the way on the Epstein files, the Transparency Act, to release all the Epstein files. Polls will be closed at the top of the hour, and we'll have the latest on that race ahead as well. Also ahead, back to our top story, DOJ's $1.8 billion fund that critics say could pay off Donald Trump's criminal allies, including people who assaulted police officers on January 6th. Former Metropolitan Police Officer Michael Flannel will be here. Deadline White House continues after a quick break. Don't go anywhere.
This is four-time All-Star Enrique.
With Cornell, Claire, and Secretary Castro. Claire, let me ask you about the polls. Let's dig in a little bit to how Trump is doing in the CBS News poll among non-college educated white voters. In February of 2025, he had a 68% approval rating there. That's historically been one of the strongest parts of his political coalition. Right now, he has a 54% disapproval and just a 46% approval, 22-point drop. That feels, again, like a very politically perilous place, not just for Trump, but to put the Republican Party ahead of the midterms.
Yeah, that group of Americans are the ones that are feeling this economic distress most acutely. And, you know, you can only pass off what's going on for so long until you have to confront it individually and with reality-based facts. And these folks can't afford to fill their gas tanks. Many of them are in rural America, and they have to drive farther than those of us who live in cities. And they are... But the part of the poll that was most interesting to me, and this partly is because of my background, I look at independents, at the crosstabs of independents carefully. And the leaners, and Cornell would be an expert on this, but when you're an independent, pollsters try to find out if you lean Republican or lean Democrat. Because many times people don't want to say they're one of the parties because they don't like the parties. Right. So they say they're independent, but they lean. Those leaners have really moved away from Donald Trump. The leaners that are leaning towards the Republican Party. 55% of the independents who lean Republican say we got to move on from Donald Trump. That is a huge number. And that is really what can make the difference for not just the midterms, but for 2 years from now, is speaking to those independents who don't think either party really has this figured out, who are very frustrated at how bad Washington is and everybody who's in it, but talking to them and making sure that you're listening to them. That's going to be the key to the kingdom here as we move forward in this really polarized environment. Because now you're really seeing, even among the Republicans, that usually there was, 10, 15%? Cornell can correct me here, that we're not crazy about Trump. Well, that's doubled now. You've got, a third of the Republicans admitting they aren't really thrilled with Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. And so that's really the kind of environment where gerrymandering is very, very dangerous, because in order to create more Republican districts, they have to be less Republican. And that means a much better chance for a Democrat to win it.
Well, I mean, Mr. Secretary, Trump has been given a handful of opportunities by very
MAGA-friendly host to walk back his comments that he doesn't care at all about the impact of the war in Iran on their personal financial standing. New York Times wrote an article about it. He's been asked about it by friendly hosts, and he called it a perfect statement. He said, quote, "It's a perfect statement. I'd make it again." So Donald Trump's stated position, even after all this polling fallout, is that he does not care about people's personal financial crises or conditions as he makes foreign policy and other policy decisions.
Yeah, I mean, and we know this is the guy that he's always been, and that's what so many of us have just suspected is in his heart. Fundamentally, he doesn't care. But I think it's true, Nicole, that in times past, he did show a willingness to sort of act a little bit more, or speak a little bit more like he did care. And for these Republican candidates, whether they're incumbents or they're challengers, it really drives home the point that this is a guy that doesn't care about you or your political future or the Republican Party even. Really what he cares about is himself. Can never admit that he's wrong, doesn't want to be seen as lowering himself by correcting himself oftentimes. And so even on something as crucial as acknowledging the pain that so many folks are feeling at the gas pump, at the grocery store, in their rent, he won't do it, even though we're going through important election season. And that in and of itself is so harmful, not only to their brand, but I think to their Republican ability to resonate and to connect in a meaningful way with voters. That's the kind of thing that's going to hurt them in November if he keeps it up.
I mean, Mr. Secretary, it's an interesting point because we've all seen the results come in from Indiana, right, where Trump successfully ousted Republicans who hadn't gone along with his rigging of the maps there. But you're making a point about the general election, where even if he fortifies and purifies these Republican primaries, all of that may accrue to the benefit of the Democratic Party. With that in mind, how are you watching, or what are you curious about in the Massey race in Kentucky?
This is a day in the life of an unpaid family tech support. I wake up at 7 a.m. to 6 missed calls, all from unknown phone numbers. Epic start. Mom texts me asking if the lottery she just won out of nowhere is real. No, Mom, it's not. My kid downloads a free game that's filled with sketchy ads and viruses. Thanks, buddy. Family group chat blows up again. Is this like real? Spoiler alert, it's not. If you've had enough of being family tech support, install Malwarebytes. It blocks scam calls, phishing emails, sketchy apps, and even alerts me if I have any info leaks online. If this sounds anything like your day, you should probably get it too.
Well, I mean, here you have a fascinating example, right? Because Republican office holders have chosen one of two paths on Trump. You have people like Bill Cassidy, who just lost his primary, but he did that even after he had kissed up to Trump, tried to convince everybody in many ways, even though he voted against Trump on some things, that he was with Trump. Same thing with John Cornyn. John Cornyn put out a tweet saying that I voted with the president 99.3% of the time, and I'm on his team. Well, he just lost out on the endorsement to Ken Paxton, and he may well lose next Tuesday. The second camp, and there are very few in this camp, are like Massey. They double down on the opposition, and they may mouth that, yes, they support the president, but really in their actions, they're consistently independent. And we haven't seen that tested nearly as much. And so this is fascinating to see if that MAGA voter base, at a time when they're turning away from Trump, like that polling that you had up on the screen a moment ago indicated, they're kind of more and more when they're done with him and they want to change the direction. Is that enough in a district like Massey's? And if they believe his sincerity and that he's standing on principle, is that enough for him to eke it out? It's going to be close.
Yeah. I mean, Cornell, what are you watching for in that Massey race?
Well, I gotta say, I'm watching for the same thing, but I will also say this. look, I think it's foolish, right, for the Republican Party overall, especially if you're Speaker Johnson. You gotta hate what's happening there. And why do you hate what's happening there? Because if the incumbent loses, what you're creating is an open seat. And again, over 85% of House incumbents win re-election. It's really hard to take out a sitting incumbent. An open seat is an easier thing, and you're talking about someone who's been winning that seat fairly safely, and you're going to create another open seat opportunity for Democrats to put even more House seats in play this time if Donald Trump is successful in taking out that incumbent, and that simply benefits Democrats more than it benefits Speaker Johnson and Republicans in the House.
Claire, I think it's interesting to watch. I mean, I think Cassidy made a terrible deal with the devil. You can't be sorted in on Trump. You are either all MAGA all the time, as Lindsey Graham and all of the Republicans in Washington, all your former friends who used to whisper to you and send me encrypted messages to keep it up, but then go before the cameras and defend Grabham and the you-know-what, good people. I mean, they've defended the indefensible. And Massey is this new example. I think that he'll test sort of for the country and for his district and for the Republican Party, how salient the betrayal is. The three betrayals have been Massey's issues: the betrayal on the wars, the betrayal on the Epstein files, and the betrayal on the economy. Do Republicans have enough self-respect to vote out someone that or to reject someone? I guess they don't have a chance to vote anyone out because Massey's the incumbent. But are those betrayals politically powerful enough yet with Republican voters?
I don't think so. I mean, I hope I'm wrong. But
yeah,
Indiana was disappointing. Indiana was disappointing.
Louisiana,
Cassidy not even making the runoff. And that's really what's going on in the Trump world. Is he sees that. He says, see, look how great I am. But it's a very small, it's a calcified group of people in these primaries.
Right.
You know, many leaners don't even vote in primaries.
Right.
A lot of people who don't like the system and don't like politics and they want to throw everybody out, they don't participate in primaries. The people who participate in primaries are the hardcore folks who feel very, very strongly. And there's more Democrats that feel that way right now because of Donald Trump. And that's why you're seeing these special elections that's overperformed. But I don't hold out hope that that Massey, I mean, I think the fact he's kept it close is remarkable. And it may be close tonight, but it will not surprise me if Donald Trump notches another win. And then he can go out tomorrow. He did a tour of the press of the ballroom this morning. Well, tomorrow we can take him out and talk about the arch. And then on the next day, he can go and look at his swimming pool. And then who knows? So maybe we can go for the Kennedy Center the next day. And he can go a whole week and not talk about things that matter to America.
Incredible. On that point, Tulsa, Kentucky closed at 6 p.m. Eastern. 8 minutes. Ali Velshi is standing by at the Big Four. We'll have results all night as they come in. Julian Castro, thank you for spending time with us today. Cornell and Claire, stick around a little bit longer. When we come back, the Justice Department's nearly $1.8 billion fund that Todd Blanche today called a slush fund that could put hard-earned taxpayer dollars into the pockets of violent January 6 insurrectionists. We'll get reaction from Officer Michael Fanone after a short break. Trump's $1.776 billion slush fund could hand out taxpayer dollars to the January 6th insurrectionists who stormed the U.S. Capitol and assaulted and beat and tased police officers, cemented his loyalty likely to his most fervent and violent supporters. One of the officers injured on January 6th, our next guest, writes this about the fund, quote, "What those rioters did was a betrayal of this country. An American betrayal committed by people waving American flags as they pummeled American cops. Then Donald Trump pardoned them, every single one. That was a deeper betrayal, a decision made in broad daylight by the President of the United States." And now this, a nearly $2 billion slush fund wrapped in an American symbol to be placed like a wreath at Arlington Cemetery to the violent insurrectionists who tried to overthrow democracy over a lie. In my book, this is the greatest betrayal of them all. This one has the seal of the Department of Justice on the letterhead. The government we ran toward that day is now telling us, in writing, that the people who tried to kill us are the victims, and we were the problem. We're joined now by Officer Michael Fanone. He's a spokesperson for Home of the Brave. Cornell and Claire are still here. Thank you for being here. I've read and seen your comments, but I wonder if you could just, let me do this. Let me show you how fast Josh Hawley ran from the insurrectionists as you ran toward them to protect men like Josh Hawley. There he is. He was running so quickly and kind of looked, I guess, more athletic than some of the other members. I think there's some video where he seems to various passes some others. And my point in showing this isn't that he shouldn't have been running. I'm glad he did. I'm glad he was saved. But he was running from people that the government is now giving $1.7 billion to. So in the moment, he didn't think they were worthy. He didn't think they were safe enough to be around. He set off running like a sprinter.
Yeah, I've lost, I don't know, I think adjectives have lost meaning in describing the actions of this administration. I guess there's a combination of two that come to mind, and it's fucking disgraceful. That taxpayer money would be used to compensate violent insurrectionists. And let's make no mistake about what this fund is going to be used for. This fund is going to be used to pay violent criminals for committing violent crimes on behalf of Donald Trump on January 6, 2021. And that's it. You know, January 20th was the nail in the coffin for accountability on January 6th. In Trump's pardoning of the 1,500 plus insurrectionists that participated in the events that day. This was like salt on you know, and it's, you know, the 1776 number, it's so blatantly obvious. It's another attempt in this administration to rebrand the violent criminals who attacked police officers on January 6th as patriots, as if they're somehow, you know, in the same vein of those that crossed the Delaware River with George Washington, you know, to free us from tyranny. It's unbelievable. It should outrage every American, and yet it doesn't.
Just so our viewers know, the actual amount of the fund is $1.776 billion. Subtlety's never been their jam. Let me ask you to just try to put into words what Democratic Senator Kristen Holland pressed Todd Blanche about today, which was that a convicted child molester told his child victims, don't tell anyone about the crimes I'm carrying out against you, because I'm going to come into restitution. This is NPR's reporting. Todd Blanche simply reacted by saying basically he couldn't have known yet, we hadn't announced it yet. And like that was essentially what the testimony amounted to. It didn't exist yet, hadn't been announced yet. And that's true. I guess a press release hadn't gone out. But this January 6th insurrectionist who would go on to commit the crime and be convicted of child molestation told one of his child victims that he would come into restitution, that Donald Trump had promised the insurrectionists. How much of the premeditation of all this is signaling to anyone in the future who might carry out political violence, which I think most normal people believe is a scourge, that not only will they be pardoned, but they might be paid?
I mean, I think that it's not speculation to assume that, first of all, I think that is a motivating factor as to why this administration is engaging in this payout. You know, and going back to what it is, it's Donald Trump and Trump's administration and his personal attorney, Todd Blanche, who cosplays as the acting attorney general, setting this up, knowing full well that not only did they absolve these individuals who committed criminal acts on this administration's behalf of criminal culpability, but that they're now going to pay them. And I can tell you right now, my DMs and my social media have been flooded with individuals who would like to kill me so that they themselves can get a payout from this administration because they think that that's what would most likely happen.
I'd be lying if I said I knew this.
It's a new chapter. You gotta have faith.
And that's what would most likely happen.
No one's going anywhere. I'm going to ask you to stick around, Michael. I want to bring Cornell and Claire into this conversation on the other side. Cornell and Claire. Michael, just before the break, you said that your DMs are full of people who want to, say, kill you to get a payout. What do you, in this moment, do with those threats?
Nothing.
Why not?
I mean, first of all, I don't trust law enforcement. I don't trust the FBI. I don't trust local law enforcement. My experience was with them over the past 5 years have been, I'll just characterize them as unpleasant. But especially since, Donald Trump was reelected and assumed office, I won't speak with anyone in the federal government. Speaking of which, I would take this opportunity that all the U.S. attorneys that have been texting me on Signal today saying how sorry they are, I don't want your sympathy. I'd rather you just quit your job. I'm not your friend. I don't want to hear from you. I want you to quit your job and stop supporting this administration.
What do you think the private messages that don't match the public cowardice signal?
I've come to understand that to be the real character of America is selfishness, self-centeredness, and cowardice. That's not to say that every American, exhibits those characteristics often or even on a daily basis, but that's what I've come to understand America to represent, especially in the post-World War II era, but certainly today. And that's how we have a Donald Trump as president, because Americans are selfish, they're self-centered, and they're cowards. Look at how many cowards we have representing us on both sides of the political aisle that either kowtow to a wannabe dictator or who stick their heads in the sand and tell us to focus on kitchen table issues as if our democracy is not being destroyed right before our very eyes.
To your point, Adam Kinzinger, who lost his art for his work on January 6th, Select Committee posted this, quote, "There's no way the Republicans would be anything less than outraged if Obama had taken almost $2 billion of taxpayer dollars and given it to people he pardoned for trying to steal an election. Every Republican in Congress who doesn't speak up and prevent this is complicit." I guess, Cornell, I would put to you both of Michael's observations. One, this false choice between the price of eggs and the burning down of our democracy. Do you think Democrats are cured of that after watching Trump's second term? And two, how do you prosecute a political case about Republicans' complicity in taking $1.8 billion of taxpayer dollars and giving it to violent insurrectionists?
It's tough to follow, Michael, after that. I got to tell you, I'm grateful for your service, brother, and keep pushing and keep fighting. And I don't disagree with your critique of America. Lord knows I've been on the show a lot with the same critique of America, and trying to push it towards better, making it better, and trying to put pressure on our political leaders so that they will be better. They will stand up and try to hold those political leaders account. And in the bottom of my heart, I still have hope that the call to their better angels, Americans will do the right thing, and that the right thing isn't just about the price of eggs, but about fundamentally, Nicole, who we are. And that most Americans see what's happening in Washington with Donald Trump, the federal government, and the policing of our country, and the undermining of our values. And they know it's not right. They know it's not them. The question is, what are they going to do about it? And we got to keep pushing that. And Michael's right. I mean, too much of our politics, and Nicole, we talked about this, too much of our politics is built on pocketbook transactions as if though that's the most important thing in people's lives as opposed to their values and their vote. And I'd simply say, we got to keep fighting the fight. We got to try to keep pushing it forward.
Got to start with the truth, though. And Michael Pannone, I can't thank you enough for your candor, your fearlessness, and for telling the truth here with us. I'm really grateful to you. Michael Pannone, Claire McCaskill, and Cornell Belcher, thank you for today. One more break, we'll be right back. Legendary Ken Burns says that history does not repeat itself, but human nature never changes. If you're looking around at these times we've been covering, if you find yourself in disbelief or feeling uncertain, take a listen to this week's episode of the Best People podcast. He's my guest, and he has a lot of wisdom to share about history and about us humans. Take a listen to what he told me about what gives him confidence in the American experiment that he spent his life documenting.
What in the world would someone from Brooklyn or Iowa be doing?
January 6, 2021, have sued today to block the nearly $1.8 billion fund established by Donald Trump to potentially pay off pardoned silent insurrectionists. In their brand new lawsuit, the officers say this, quote, "The fund endangers the lives and safety of plaintiffs Harry Dunn,
Didn't expect it to go that
officers who defended the
all the
Capitol
way
on
to
January 6, 2021.
Didn't expect to do that.
By its very existence,
Forgot about it. Forgot I had it
the
on
fund encourages those who enacted
speed dial.
violence in the president's name to continue to do so.
Doing
Dunn
all
and
right?
Hodges already face credible threats of death and violence on a regular basis. The fund substantially increases the danger. Second, if allowed to begin making payments, the fund will directly finance the violent operations of rioters, paramilitaries, and their supporters who threatened the plaintiffs' lives that day and continue to do so. Here's a little reminder of what happened that day and a reminder of the actions of the people who may soon be receiving a payout funded by our taxpayer dollars, as described by the officers who defended the U.S. Capitol and testified before the January 6th Select Committee.
I felt the bike rack come on top of my head, and I was pushed backwards, and my foot caught the stair behind me. My chin hit the handrail, and then at that point I blacked out, but my back of my head clipped the concrete stairs behind me.
I was grabbed, beaten, tased, all while being called a traitor to my country. I was at risk of being stripped of and killed with my own firearm, as I heard chants of kill him with his own gun. As I was swarmed by a violent mob, they ripped off my badge, they grabbed, stripped me of my radio, they seized ammunition that was secured to my body. They began to beat me with their fists and with what felt like hard metal objects.
I too was being crushed by the rioters. I could feel myself losing oxygen and recall thinking to myself, this is how I'm going to die.
Several attempted to knock me over and steal my baton. One latched onto my face and got his thumb in my right eye, attempting to gouge it out. I cried out in pain, managed to shake him off. Managed to shake him off before any permanent damage was done. I was effectively defenseless and gradually sustaining injury from the increasing pressure of the mob. Directly in front of me, a man seized the opportunity of my vulnerability, grabbed the front of my gas mask, and used it to beat my head against the door.
One woman in a pink MAGA shirt yelled, "You hear that, guys? This voted for Joe Biden." Then the crowd, perhaps around 20 people, joined in screaming, "Boo!" No one had ever called me while wearing the uniform of a Capitol Police officer.
So the people who did that called Harry Dunn the N-word for the first time in his life while wearing a uniform of a Capitol Police officer. Those people who beat officers to within minutes of their lives, people who committed those brutal acts of violence that we all saw with our own eyes because it happened on live TV in broad daylight, those people, all of them who were pardoned, are now also eligible to be paid out with our money, taxpayer dollars. Officers Hodges and Dunn, who you saw in those clips and who filed the lawsuit today, put it this way in their lawsuit, quote, "Payments from the fund will be used to finance the operations of those who have threatened and tried to kill the plaintiffs." It's actually, for all the gaslighting that happens in Trump 2.0, these facts are things that J.D. Vance and Todd Blanche have refused to rule out in public comments they've made over the last 24 hours. Here's what J.D. Vance said.
You know who never ever gets an ounce of sympathy when it comes to that disproportionate sentencing is people who voted for Donald Trump and participated in the January 6th protest.
Fresh pick new releases, finely aged vintage classics, and hard-to-find imports. You can buy, sell, trade, and play with us at our store in Fitchburg, Wisconsin. Or shop online
Fucking piece of shit.
24/7.
It wasn't a protest. It was an insurrection attempt.
The January 6th
Fucking piece of shit.
We start today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. Brendan Ballou is here. He is representing Harry Dunn and Daniel Hodges in the lawsuit brought today to block Donald Trump's so-called anti-weaponization fund. He's also the founder of the Public Integrity Project and a former special counsel in the Department of Justice. Also joining us, Scott McFarland. He's the chief Washington correspondent for Midas Touch. He's done extensive investigative reporting in and around the Capitol insurrection, including the prosecutions, the event itself, the sentencing, the trials of the rioters, and everything that's happened since then. Brendan, first tell me about the lawsuit.
Yeah, so, this is an act of extraordinary presidential corruption, maybe the most in American history, but it's more than just corruption. As you were talking about, my clients, Danny Hodges and Harry Dunn, could have died on January 6th, but the threats didn't stop there. They have continued to receive credible death threats for years for speaking out about January 6th. And what could happen here is that the very people who threatened their lives on January 6th and beyond could suddenly be getting millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. And what I want people to understand is that this is about more than just corruption. This is about encouraging and endorsing violence by people who are acting in the president's name, but fundamentally beyond the reach of the law. And if this fund is allowed to continue, if this is allowed to disperse money, what we will be doing in America for the first time since the KKK is financing paramilitary organizations in the United States, militias, insurrectionists, who are willing to be violent for the president, but are not accountable to the law.
I want to bring into our coverage the ranking member of the House Oversight Committee, Congressman Robert Garcia of California. Congressman, thank you for being here. I want to play what your colleague, Congressman Jamie Raskin, said about this so-called weaponization fund at a hearing today.
Not a single J6er has had charges thrown out because of a false, malicious, or retaliatory prosecution. Not a single one has had their criminal conviction reversed on appeal because of a false, malicious, or retaliatory prosecution. The idea that they were falsely or maliciously prosecuted has not been found by a single judge, Republican, Democratic, or independent appointee. And this is a defamatory slur on law enforcement and the serious civil servants at the DOJ who've been under attack since this nightmare of MAGA weaponization began in January of last year. False, malicious, and retaliatory prosecutions are how Donald Trump and his DOJ operate, not real law enforcement, not real prosecutors.
It's an important, I think, alignment, right, of every judge, whether they were appointed by Democrats or Republicans, has upheld the convictions, the criminal convictions of the insurrectionists. Not one of them has found any one of them to be retaliatory or the result of a weaponized prosecution. What do you make of both the announcement of the fund and the lawsuit on behalf of officers to stop it?
I mean, first, let's be really clear. This fund is completely outrageous. It's complete corruption from the most corrupt president in the most corrupt administration in the history of our country. And this fund might be the most corrupt thing that the president has actually done, on top of the crypto funds, the real estate deals, selling access to the White House, the investment funds. The idea that you're going to take $1.8 billion that you negotiated yourself between your own government and then hand it out to criminals, to traitors, to election deniers, to Donald Trump's friends, for all we know, to himself, possibly. We have no idea what Donald Trump is thinking. We're hearing right now, I'm actually stunned at how many Republicans on the Hill are actually finally saying what the hell is going on. And I would hope that the Speaker, Mike Johnson, would actually have a backbone to denounce this fund. I support Jimmy Raskin's efforts, and oversight's also going to be involved in looking at who actually gets these funds and what corruption is actually happening there.
Say more about Republicans speaking out against the fund.
Look, I talked to some colleagues. I was in a committee earlier that were discussing it. Hopefully some of them will be a little bit louder in their comments, but you are hearing, whether it's Representative Fitzpatrick and others, coming out very clearly, Representative Kiley coming out and saying, this is crazy. This is corruption. And I think we've got to hear more Republicans saying that. There shouldn't be an American on the ground anywhere in this country that should support what's happening. He is stealing your money. He is stealing our money directly from your pockets and putting it into his and into the pockets of his friends. And the complete lack of respect for law enforcement, to give a penny to the January 6ers, the people that invaded this Capitol, that attacked this Capitol, that try to overthrow an election, just goes to show you the kind of man that Donald Trump is. He is a small, pathetic loser who has no business getting a dime to give to anybody.
There's a real thread that's been articulated through legal experts and through the officers themselves that if the people who carried out violence, and their mission statement that day was actually to, quote, hang Mike Pence. That was what they were there to do. And the reason J.D. Vance is the current vice president is because that relationship couldn't be recovered after Donald Trump was unrepentant, but his supporters chanting hang Mike Pence. That was the mission of one of the missions of the insurrection. What do you make of the fact that the insurrectionists themselves have now been pardoned and he seeks to pay them? How does that...
3 reasons men 45 plus enjoy connecting with Asian women. Many are family oriented, hardworking and loyal, gentle, caring, and attentive. On our site, you'll find verified profiles only. Women message first, chat, unlock private photos and videos, and start building a real connection. Register now and get welcome credits. Your loneliness ends now.
2,600 pallets left. You got 18,000 per trip.
If you ever do want to prevent yourself and your private information from being out there on the internet all willy-nilly, and you want to protect your privacy online, then
So it better not be another game this
because it is genuinely concerning how much of our private information is out there right now. And we know this from people's locations being leaked, the spam phone calls, the spam text messages, emails for things you never signed up for. It's too much. And the problem is that there's these data brokers that find any information they can about you. It's not just data brokers, but horrible people too. They do anything they can to find any information about you, and they buy and sell it for profit.
And he seeks to pay them. How does that play out in terms of future threats of violence?
Look, it's crazy and insanity that an American president wants to compensate people that attacked the Capitol, people that tried to essentially murder the vice president, people that were caused harm to police officers on the ground. There were people across this Capitol, people that were on the staff, that were law enforcement, whether they were members of Congress, that were in terror, and that still are suffering, in many cases, the ramifications of what happened that day. And we know that these January 6ers, many of them have gone on to commit additional crimes. There's no judge in the country that will support what they did. They all believe that they should have justice and pay the price. And yet Donald Trump is obsessed with retribution. He's obsessed with going after anyone that he believes has wronged him. And he weaponizes the government in the favor of his allies. He's also sending a clear message that if you are loyal to Donald Trump, he's always going to compensate you. And that is a dangerous place to be for our democracy. So I support this lawsuit, of course, that is in place. We've got to support additional legislation that's coming out of our committees based on this fund. And then we've got to investigate.
It's not going down. It's staying at 2,600. What the fuck?
Is likely there as well.
NPR reported, and this came up in the questioning yesterday, I think Senator Chris Van Hollen had a line of questioning to this effect with Todd Blanche, that a convicted child molester who's been adjudicated and is serving a life sentence in prison told one of his child victims of molestation that he was coming into a lot of money and that this child victim of molestation had to keep quiet. And if he did keep quiet, this insurrectionist would give him some of the restitution that he'd been promised from the Trump administration. Will the investigation include sort of the premeditation and the communications? Obviously, this is a convicted child molester who went on to commit more crimes after he was pardoned for being an insurrectionist. How did he know that there was a slush fund coming his way? Will you be able to get to the bottom of questions like that?
Those are exactly the questions that need answers. And in the case that you're describing, obviously horrific. Every single one of these J6ers or the election deniers or whoever else gets this money needs to understand that we are going to investigate you. We're going to ensure that the American taxpayer understand every single piece of how this happened, who knew what, did the president tip people off, were folks in his orbit letting people know that they were actually going to, that this deal was going to happen, which of course Donald Trump essentially, between his own government himself, negotiated. And how on earth can this Congress stand by and not have hearings and investigate one of the most poisonally corrupt actions by anyone, certainly an American president, in our history? I mean, Donald Trump leaves anyone in the past. I mean, you think about Nixon, you think about Watergate, you think about other actions in the past. Donald Trump is stealing from the American public in broad daylight. And Mike Johnson and John Thune are saying absolutely nothing.
I want to ask you about someone who's aligned himself with your work on the Epstein Transparency Act from the other side of the aisle, Thomas Massie, who lost his primary last night. He had a little, I mean, I've watched a lot of victory speeches, I've watched a lot of concession speeches. He had a little glint in his eye about the work he could do in the next 7 months as the sitting member of Congress. Have you talked to him, or do you know what sort of work in terms of being unshackled from having to appease Donald Trump he had in mind?
Look, I don't know what obviously what Tom is going to do next, and I think whatever he decides will be really interesting to see. What I do know is that I never doubted that he was a patriot and loved his country. We obviously disagreed on most things, and I think that was clear. However, what he has done, his legacy on protecting survivors, on getting the Epstein Transparency Act into law, on always standing up for his values, Kentucky, what he believed was the Republican Party is unmatched. And he was always willing to stand up to Donald Trump, to Mike Johnson. He stood up for survivors. He stood up for ensuring that we had the right subpoenas in place, and we were pushing issues around Pam Bondi testifying. And for that, I think that the country should be grateful for his service in those areas. And I think it's really unfortunate that someone that was so involved and pushing back lost his primary. It's a really sad night. Donald Trump again now strengthens his hand over his party and proves to the rank and file that he's going to come after you if you don't follow him every single time.
Even when it's wildly unpopular. Congressman Robert Garcia, thank you for taking time to talk to us today about all this. We're appreciative. We're going to turn back to Brendan Ballou. We haven't talked yet with journalist Scott McFarlane. We'll also get to some new reporting on Donald Trump's very, very MAGA pardon attorney who's been promising the January 6th defendants this big payday for months. We'll bring you that reporting next. Also coming up, be careful what you wish for. Donald Trump and his allies in Washington while pushing for what we've been discussing, this unflinching loyalty.
Hammered them. You know what? They probably should get their, I don't know, their car back. They should probably get their job back. They might need to get their military benefits back. I think they should get paid back for being destroyed by their government. We should be afraid. You know, you want to pay J6ers? You're damn right I want to pay J6ers.
Dad, what do you actually do at work? Project management. Why? I'm doing a career thing for school. How much do project managers make? Depends. ChatGPT says average is like $130. Where did you see that? Google. Yeah, just quick question. If you found out someone who just started your job gets paid 40% more than you, what would you do?
How did you find out?
Doesn't matter.
Talk to your boss.
And say what?
The truth.
I don't know what the truth is anymore.
You're damn right I want to pay J6ers.
So this is Ed Martin doing away with the Trump 1.0 term, saying the quiet part out loud. Now it's just all the loud part out loud all the time. Importantly, Ed Martin serves as the pardon attorney for Donald Trump. He's the one who's been advocating very publicly for the payment, cash payments for the J6ers, who he has used to grow his political career inside Donald Trump's orbit. It appears now that his plans, which he talked about on podcasts, have come to pass. NBC News reports that earlier this year, that guy, Ed Martin, predicted that the Justice Department would do this. It would dole out millions of dollars to those Gen 6ers who've been charged and then later pardoned for participating in the riot at the Capitol. That's according to two people familiar with the matter. Ed Martin estimated it would be something along the lines of $40 million, those people said. Of course, the pot ended up being much, much, much larger. DOJ denies, Ed Martin said, what is in the NBC News reporting. With that, with Brendan and Scott. Scott, I guess the good news here is what the congressman was alluding to. You know, how bad is it? It's so bad, even terrified Republicans are vowing to, quote, kill it.
There are so many Republicans coming out against this thing, Nicole. It appears to me this slush fund is like as popular as poison ivy or a dinner plate full of vegetables, even for Republicans. I've got a whole list here. Brian Fitzpatrick told me he wants to just kill this thing. Fitzpatrick won a primary, faces a tough re-election in Pennsylvania. David Schweiker, frontline Republican in Arizona, says he's
here we go,
very
into June,
concerned,
and beginning
deeply
the
concerned
summer
about the
harvest.
money. And Don Bacon says he's not sure how Trump got this whole lawsuit settled. How do you negotiate against yourself? He's troubled. But I go deeper here. There are some MAGA Republicans who are equivocating. Clay Higgins of Louisiana, I asked him if he's comfortable with the payout. He says he's comfortable having a conversation about how this works. And Lindsey Graham says he wants to see what happens when it gets to the Senate floor. Nicole, that presumes this thing even goes to the Senate floor. It'd be Republicans who put it there. Nobody is claiming ownership of this thing. I have zero statements of support for this fund from any congressional Republican.
I mean, you raise a good point. I mean, the fund also includes this insane statement that came out a little bit after Todd Blanche's testimony that says that from now to the end of time, Donald Trump can never, ever, 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 ever be investigated or prosecuted for tax crimes, can never, ever, ever be audited. Neither can his kids, neither can his companies. They're doing all sorts of foreign deals and business with the government and the Pentagon and whatnot. Are they speaking out about that part of it as well?
Same dynamic with this idea of a permanent hall pass or tax cheating. There are no Republicans declaratively saying that's a great idea. I support it. I'm going to go home to my constituents and champion this too. None of this is happening in a vacuum though, right, Nicole? If you're running a campaign and you know the issue you want to hit on is prices and affordability, do you want to carry the baggage that is a Trump-inspired, taxpayer-funded payout to himself, to his supporters, to violent rioters who maimed, beat, and in some cases blinded police, and you want to be there for them to use taxpayer money to the ball with?
all of this kind of thing infuses a wave that is fully formed. And I want to add one note. All the misinformation, something that the misinformation spreading about January 6th today, the idea that these cases were wrongful, no case was overturned. Not a one on appeal, and lots of people appealed, and as Brendan would tell you, they had a 100% success rate for juries at trial. If you've ever been on jury duty, you know how impossible it is to get 12 people to agree on a lunch order. They got every single jury, dozens of them, to agree to convict.
Brendan, what is that, if you pull that thread forward, just talk about your legal strategy for blocking the fund in court.
Yeah, so the basic problem the government has is that it has absolutely no statutory authority to enter into a settlement like this, and it really, frankly, isn't even settlement. So the first problem that you have is this was a sham settlement based on a lawsuit that lacked regular subject matter jurisdiction, so there wasn't even really a case to settle. But even if there were, what this is not actually a legal settlement. It's functionally the creation of a new government department or agency, one that the Attorney General is going to get to appoint the members for. The President is going to get to remove those members, and it's going to be their discretion, ultimately, about how this money gets spent. And so, the analogy that I use is you can't use the fiction of a lawsuit settlement to create a new government agency, like the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the FCC, or something like that. And you can't do that to create this sort of legal monstrosity that they're doing right now. So there's any number of ways that this is violating the law, obviously.
Scott, let me bring back to, I think, everyone's awareness what this group of people have done in addition to the footage we started the hour with, beating almost to within inches of consciousness, and some feared for their own lives, cops. After they were pardoned, 33 pardoned insurrectionists have gone on to commit other charges, other crimes. This is from Crew. Quote, at least 33 January 6 insurrectionists pardoned by Trump have been rearrested, charged or sentenced for other crimes since January 6, 2021, according to new analysis by Crew. 6 of the pardoned January 6 insurrectionists are charged with committing child sex crimes, ranging from sexual assault to possession of child pornography. At least 5 were charged with illegal possession of weapons, including at least 2 had a previous domestic violence conviction. 5 were arrested or charged with driving while impaired or under the influence. In 2 of the cases, the defendant's reckless driving resulted in a fatality and a death. 2 were charged with rape. These are serious violent crimes. Child sex crimes, rape, and domestic violence. Those are the people who Donald Trump pardoned. That, in normal times, is a political scandal of the century. But now those are the people who J.D. Vance and Todd Blanche will rule out.
This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to grab a true 16-terabyte ultra-large capacity, 1,000 megabytes per second transfer speed portable SSD for the price of a chocolate bar. Originally prepared for export to the Middle East, these drives were stranded at the port due to unforeseen circumstances. The company has now decided to sell factory prices to recoup losses. It supports PCIe and NVMe protocols and features a USB 3.2 Gen 2 interface with Type-C. It can connect to your camera, laptop, tablet, or smartphone. Includes a connecting cable and is compatible with Thunderbolt 3.4 transfer speeds. Reach up to 1,000 megabytes per second. Transfer a 2-hour video in just 3 minutes. Built with certified flash memory chips inside, it won't overheat even under continuous high load. The massive 16 terabyte storage capacity is enough to hold an entire library. All your files, photos, and videos will find a home on this single drive. Thanks to its compact and portable size, you can easily carry it every workday. IP54 rated physical protection, waterproof and shockproof. It works normally even if immersed in water. Stock is extremely limited with only the last 50 units remaining. We offer a 10-year around you and a worry-free e-trial. Don't miss out on this opportunity.
Dang it! Dang it! Fuck.
Wow. Hey.
A lot of people I talk to who were victims of January 6th, the staffers, the police, do not like the vice president using the term January 6th protest in the briefing room yesterday. We'll put that aside for a moment. You mentioned the recidivism, people who've been charged with new crimes in the months since their pardon. It includes the case you referenced earlier, the case of Andrew Johnson of Florida, who not only was convicted of molestation, but according to police, told the victim to provide hush money from the payout he planned to get them from down the road. I can tell you in the courtroom, watching those cases, watching those prosecutions, there was so much unapologetic boasting about future pardons or future glory from the defendants, even to their own detriment, Nicole. During their criminal cases, they knew this day was coming. They sensed this day was coming. And it's one of the reasons why the victims of January 6th, including the plaintiffs who are filing the suit with Brandon, feel like they need to make a change here. We cannot vindicate, lionize, and enrich people. It comes.
And it's just amazing that that's a partisan statement or a controversial statement. Brendan, I know you're representing Terry Dunn and Daniel Hodges. Country got to know many of the officers through the public hearings, the January 6th Select Committee hearings, but I wonder what you're hearing from the broader group of officers, those who became clear for ourselves from Officer Michael Fanone yesterday. He described the slush fund as an effing disgrace in his characteristically blunt way. But what are you hearing from other officers who may not be as public?
Yeah, and Scott and I have sort of, been following this for years, sort of knew each other down the hallway in the BDC courtroom when I was prosecuting cases and he was following them. And I think we both have talked to any number of folks that were affected by January 6th who, see this as part of a broader story, a story to try to rewrite the history of that day so that people either forget about the attack on the Capitol or worse yet, condone it. And the reason that matters so much, the reason why we're still having a fight over something that happened over 5 years ago, is if the president is able to convince people to forget or accept the attack on the Capitol, then he knows that he can convince people to accept any attack on democracy. And so, the people that I talk to understand that this fight over the past is really a fight over the future, and it's absolutely essential in this sort of litigation, through other cases, through advocacy, through reporting, that people understand what January 6th was.
Brendan Ballou and Scott McFarland, two people who help us do that. Thank you both so much for starting us off today. After the break, someone who's been on the receiving end of Donald Trump's attempts to weaponize the Department of Justice. We'll talk to the former director of the CIA about Donald Trump's takeover and corruption in the federal government. Stay with us.
Know how it will work and how it will be administered. Kiddingly, want to know, do I get to apply? Well, if there's a weaponization, you have to ask for attorney's fees. We'll have to see.
Would you submit a claim?
I might, maybe just to be humorous about the whole thing, but if it's for people who've been targeted for reasons other than the normal standards of the Department of Justice, I'm ready to get in line.
3 reasons men 45 plus enjoy connecting with Asian women. Many are family-oriented, hardworking and loyal, gentle, caring, and attentive. On our site, you'll find verified profiles only. Women message first, chat, unlock private photos and videos, and start building a real connection. Register now and get welcome credits. Your loneliness ends now.
Oh, not now. Yeah, dude, that doesn't look good. I know what to do.
What's that?
You go to cashnetusa.com. I can apply in minutes, and if approved, I can have the money as soon as the same business day.
Oh, nice save.
Save
All right.
Cashnet USA.
A little over 3.5 hours. That's probably good enough for now. It's 6:06, June 1st, second year of this map. This is Farming Simulator 22, Michigan Farms map.
Former director of the FBI, Jim Comey, Monday night. And
Michigan
beyond the
Pizza and Donut
reason
Farm, part
flagrant corruption
54
of
Bravo.
$1.8 billion
Thanks for watching. We'll see you all
slush
later.
fund,
Y'all take
there's
care.
also